Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. It is Tuesday, February 17th, 2026. This is America, Some Assembly Required. And so today, I have to tell you, I woke up this morning and it felt like I had an elephant on my chest and a little bit of a fire burning in there, as well as a little bit of drainage and things. So I don't know how long my voice is going to hold up, or my lungs are going to hold out here. So I thought maybe today we'd just take some questions and answers from you all, and see if we can help you begin to kind of firm up some of the edges of things that are going on in your assembly, and maybe questions that you have about the process. So maybe a very short meeting if no one asks questions, and that's okay with me, the way I'm feeling today. So let's take some questions, put some questions in the chat, and let's try to get some understanding going on within our assemblies. So, hello, Missouri. Hello, fellow Ohioans. So what can I answer for you today? How's everybody's jural assemblies going? Are you getting your jural assemblies assembled and up? Do you have questions on court process? How about militia? How's your militia doing? Oh, okay. So as Ohio chair, what is your best advice for other state assemblies? Well, first of all, just to kind of talk about the Ohio Assembly, the Ohio Assembly is a very active assembly. We have education going on at least 4 to 5 days a week, 4 or 5 sessions a week. 4 of those sessions are on either law education or our court system, or on just general thinking about law and the processes of law, the thinking process, the logic processes of law, as well as the foundations. And then we also have our grand jury training. And then Tuesday evenings, we do orientation classes, basically on 8 topics. And so education is the thing I would tell you, because the more education we can give to people, the more they're going to understand what our process, what our purpose is, and how our assemblies are supposed to work. Okay. So start finding some people who are willing to step up and talk about just different topics. Doesn't have to be anybody that's, designated, as long as they're willing to do a little bit of research and then present that research out there. A lot of times what I've done in the past is I've gone out to Anna's articles and I go into the advanced chat that's there. It's like 3. There's the main chat, there's another chat, and then there's the third chat that's down just a little bit further on the right-hand side of the page. And you can put a topic in there. And so, for example, just, militia. And it has quite a few articles about militia. It will key in on those words, and then it will turn around and it will give you all the articles. Now, what I do is a lot of times in my research is I'll pull those articles up, and then I take the highlighter that's in my PDF program, and I highlight the sections that are most important in them. What's speaking to our assemblies directly, and the concepts that are being presented, right? I take those comments and I aggregate them in a Word document. And then that's what I use a lot of times to teach from, is to form that research and then teach from that research. Okay. So I would say that number one is your education. If your assembly will advance if your education advances. Number two is doing your outreach, and being able to, outreach is the duty of everyone on our assemblies. And it's really up to each of us to be inviting, to be neighborly, to kind of spread the word. And so doing outreach, whether that's just inviting everybody out to dinner on your county, your friends, the people you know, put up a flyer, maybe in a public place, in a restaurant, and see what the net catches when you cast it out there. So, outreach is the next thing that builds our assemblies. But if we have nothing going on in our assembly but a once a week meeting, you're not going to attract many people. They're just not going to put their time and their effort into that to necessarily, because they don't know which way to go. They don't know how or what your purpose really is. And so you really want to try to meet, provide some education. There's plenty of pieces and articles and everything that is out there. Start at the beginning and begin to talk about the things that are foundational to each of our states. The Declaration of 1776, the Treaty of Paris, 1783, the Northwest Ordinance, how that affects our states. Talk about the 10th Amendment, why our states are allowed to assemble and have a state assembly. So those would be good outreach topics that you can put together a package and maybe just go and present it. Maybe you get your outreach team working on some type of a nice flyer or a education piece. Next thing is to try to get your processes in place. For many years, I asked the assembly this morning, for many years we heard about the blueprint. And I'm still looking for the blueprint because we never found it on Ohio. The blueprint that we had was the 4 assemblies and the committees. And we knew what to do with that when we looked at it and realized that those committees went with certain assemblies and that we had to get those committees up and working. And work on that collectively as you go through, and then begin to kind of put in the details. What is your assembly supposed to look like, right? How is it supposed to operate? Because we all need the basis for how we're going to operate our assemblies, so there's no misunderstandings. And so it's important for us to put our time into the foundational elements of our assembly to begin to get that basis that we can operate on. Many of the assemblies that haven't done that work are still struggling with assembling. They haven't been able to agree on how they're going to operate. And that leads to the fights instead of the progress. And so, my best advice is do those 3 things. If you do those 3 things, then your people are going to follow along very quickly. And you're going to gain the people that you need to operate. You're going to engage them. You're going to have them get in and get involved. They're going to assist you with the education, with the committees, with the processes. And once you can get that ball rolling, it rolls. It keeps rolling. And it keeps getting better and better as you go along. So, many times I've said, lay down your swords and beat them into plowshares. A biblical reference, right? Which means we've got work to do. And we need to be able to quit fighting with each other and begin to discuss, sometimes debate, take the best of those ideas and make them into an assembly. Okay? So that's probably my best advice to every assembly out there. Okay? And And thanks for that question. All right. Who speaks to the Secretary of State on behalf of the Assembly? Well, the Secretary, you're talking about the Secretary of State of your state, correct? And so that would be your speaker, your elected chairman, chairwoman, if you prefer. And they would be the ones that would be able to call the state Secretary of State and have that conversation. Remember, your chairman has a dual role. Your chairman is both the speaker for your assembly, and inside the assembly, they are your chairman. They're the operational kind of head of operations for your assembly. Okay. So the chairman, once elected by your assembly, they are the ones that sign all the notices. They put them out to the Secretary of State or to the governor. They correspond back and forth. That's I always laugh and say, well, that's what I get paid the big bucks for, right? We have to remember we are public governments. Okay. And in our public government, our elected officials have to be willing to be public. We have to be willing to be contacted. We have to be willing to speak on behalf of the assembly, right? So, so that would be your chairman. So when you're speaking of a chairman, you want somebody who's, kind of able to hold their ground, speak well, and know what their assembly history and American history really is, and can present the ideas of your assembly in an effective manner. Okay. So I hope you can ask a follow-up question if that's not clear enough. Okay. In regards to proof of domicile, what is required? Well, we could ask somebody, how long have you lived on state as they're coming in as an intake? And if they're going like, well, I've kind of moved in, I moved out, the best proof of our domicile is either our a lease agreement, utility bills in our name, and you could also make sure that the witnesses on their witness statements state not only how long they've known them, but how long have they are they aware that they've been on the state. Get two witnesses to witness that, right? Unless you have a highly transient state, that really doesn't need to be a great big question, right? We mostly want to make sure that someone who's been domiciled on our state, who wants to participate in our state assembly, has been there at least a year and a day so that they can fully participate in our assembly, vote, and everything else. It's not meant to keep people out of our assemblies. It's none of that. It's not gatekeeping, right? So, if you've got questions about that, somebody needs to, here's a utility bill for 2020, 2024, 2025. Okay. So pretty obvious you've been here. And that's really all you really need. Okay. All right. And what is domicile? Well, to begin with, on our states, for assembly participation, we require a year and a day. And after that, to maintain domicile, it's 6 months and a day. So once they're in our state, as long as, they're not spending 7 months in Florida and 5 months in, say, Minnesota or Idaho or something like that, where it might be cool or cold, then they have domicile on your state. But if they're spending 7 months in Florida, then it's more appropriate that they're Floridians than they are Montanans. Okay. As an example. So 1 year and 1 day to participate in your assembly. After that, they have to spend at least 6 months in a day. And they do not necessarily need to have more than being on your state and having the ability to prove that they have a home on your state to be papered up. We put no barriers to changing our statuses. Okay. All right. Okay. What is the best way to recruit new members, i.e. best way to target? Well, I'll give you an experience I had this weekend. My husband and I went out for Valentine's Day to a charity event. Great charity event. It was called Heaven's Gain. It's about a ministry that takes care of women and couples and families when they've had a miscarriage or a rainbow baby. And so we went to this charity event with friends of ours. And sitting at the table, sitting right next to me at our table was the office manager for the organization and her two sisters. And the sister that was sitting next to me was extremely friendly, very neighborly, very friendly. And she said, well, what do you all do for a living? And my friend and I both said, well, we're retired. And my friend laughed at me and she kind of gave me the elbow. And she says, what's that for? And I said, okay, well, I'm semi-retired. And she says, oh, okay, all right. She goes, well, I retired from the Cincinnati Police Department. I was their academy trainer. I arranged all of their education programs. To me, that's bing, 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 bang. This could be a very interesting conversation, right? So I sat and said, oh, tell me more about what you did. Well, why did you retire? Because she wasn't 65. She was younger. And she was saying, yeah, she might have to go back to work and work a little bit more. And I said, well, why did you retire? And she goes, it's getting crazy. She says, it's getting absolutely insane and crazy out there. I said, really? I said, tell me what your perception is of that. Why do you think that's happening? I don't know. It's just not the same world we were raised in. It's just, and she goes, and some of these people, oh my gosh, she says, they're almost untrainable. She's talking about our police academy, right? She says, so you're semi-retired. She says, so what did you semi-retire to do? And I said, well, I have a wonderful volunteer job with the Ohio Assembly, the American government on Ohio. And I just left it sit. And she turned around and her head like whipped around and looked at me. She went, tell me more about that. She said, I don't know anything about that. There's an American government on Ohio? Oh, yes, there is. And my friend was like, uh-oh, there she goes. She's going to be off in the, and I laughed and I said, yeah, I said, our American government is there. I said, was always supposed to be there to help direct the corporate government. She goes, boy, they really need it. And I said, this could be the great conversation. Because she said, so tell me where this all stems from. So I began a conversation and I let her keep going. Okay, tell me more about that. Okay, I didn't know that. Well, can you give me more details about this? And I'd say, great. I said, make sure you're writing down some of these details because you're going to want to go look them up. Being the trainer for the Cincinnati Police Academy, I know you're going to go do your research, right? Complimenting her, encouraging her, having her move along. And finally, she looked at me. She kept saying, shut the front door, shut the front door, as I started putting the pieces together for her. And it got to a point where at one point she was like, stop. My brain is on overload. And I laughed because I said, yes. I said, okay. I said, just understand that that's normal. I said, you probably taught this at the police academy, making connections, affirming what she's known. And I said, that's called cognitive dissonance. You deal with victims in the same way. They can't believe what just happened to them. They can't believe that everything that they knew about whatever it was just happened to them criminally, right? And I said, it happens to us when we learn information or are exposed to something that is contrary to what we believed all along, okay? And I said, it's the same thing. The cognitive dissonance is the same thing. It's just that I'm challenging everything your favorite high school teacher and your favorite junior high teacher taught you about American government, or didn't teach you about American government and taught you about U.S. government. I said, now that you've heard enough, now it's time to go research what I've told you. And I said, here's my email. Here's our website. Here's the TASA website. Now, go and look it up. Convince yourself. And I said, and I'll be waiting for your email. Okay? One-on-one is really a lot of times the best way to recruit new members. You know, I post a lot of things on Facebook. I know a lot of people have given up Facebook. I know, okay? But it's still a very valuable and viable communication because people maintain their Facebook in order to stay in touch with old friends and family members a lot of times. Whether you call that Facebook or Instagram or, you know, TikTok, whatever it is that however you choose to get out on social media. Right now on Ohio, for example, there is a big push about canceling and axing the property tax. It's an organic movement from the municipal citizens of Ohio to get rid of property taxes. Now, they don't know completely what they're dealing with, okay? And the Ohio governor is really pushing hard back, but they're continuing forward because they believe, and so do many of the county governments on Ohio believe, they're going to get it done. They're going to tell them, you're done with taxation. Okay? Now, I can't vote in that election. I can't vote in that referendum, but I can certainly encourage them to vote in that referendum. I can feed the information that I know about the fraud regarding mortgage fraud and property tax fraud and all the tax fraud. Okay? I can put that in there and feed the fire. And in some ways, we've picked up 3 new members because of that, because they come back and go, I looked up what you put in there. And I'll be darned. You guys know what you're doing. Okay? So we need to use all the tools. You know, some of the restaurants have bulletin boards. You walk in, you can put your business card up there. Put a business card up. Put one of your assembly flyers. Create a little tear-off sheet that they can tear off put a little information on it. Change it out. Offer an education class at the local library on, say, the Declaration of Independence, the Northwest Ordinance, on the Constitution. Where's their side of the fence? What's our side of the fence? What do amendments mean? Who do they apply to? Tear them apart one by one and present them. Libraries are always looking for people to present free programs, right? Great way to recruit. Put that up and have it out there and recruit those people. As long as you've got somebody who can talk about and answer questions, or have a panel that is there that can talk about and answer questions, you're going to pick up a couple people. The next time you have one of those, you'll pick up a couple more. They'll bring their friends. Hey, you need to listen to this, right? So as we go through, the best way to recruit new members is to give them information, credible information, information that they can go and check out in the meantime, right? And you can resource them. You could bring them copies of things that they can take home and read. But some of the best way is to go in and actually resource them so that they can go read it themselves. Okay? They don't have to take your word, because they've been fed a line of stuff since they were born, right? So those are good ideas, those few things. If you start that library tour, then you may very well find that you pick up quite a few members locally and around. Now, we all have to be willing to kind of, believe it or not, when I was 25 or 26 years old, I could handle a classroom full of kids, but not a classroom full of parents. I couldn't have stood up and spoke like this, like I'm speaking to you today, when I was 25. I had to get over the fear and get to the facts and the information. And once I got over that, you can't shut me up, right? So it's one of those things that we have to try to be willing to be outside of our normal box. And remember, we're neighbors. We're trying to be neighbors. That's what our militia is really all about. If I had to characterize the very character of our militias, I would say we're neighbors being neighbors. And we have to learn to find what neighbor really means. And so going out and talking at times to neighbors, one of the things I did was I put the civil flags up on my flagpole in my little community up in the summer. And I spend a lot of time outside in the yard. And there will be people who will actually stop in their golf cart or in their car and go, "Can you explain that flag to me?" What a great outreach. I put them on my car. If we go to a restaurant and we meet in a restaurant with a group from our county, we take our civil flag and put it up while we're there. And people will come by and go, "Hey, I've seen that flag before. What does that mean?" That's your opportunity, right? That's opportunity knocking and waiting for you to express what you know in a friendly way. But I always tell everybody, small bites. You want to make sure that you're not getting to the point where you get that cognitive dissonance reaction. In a way, on Saturday, I knew I would get that reaction. I knew when it probably was coming. But I also knew that she knew what cognitive dissonance was. And it was going to give me an absolute best opportunity to say, okay, I know what you're experiencing. I can see it. And it's okay. It's all right. But go look it up. Go check out what I just told you. You'll find that it's true. Okay? All right. Sorry. What does it take to build list militia? Well, we are all militia on our assemblies. We just have to take up our duty. So those that are 21 to 45 have an absolute duty to the militia. Do they have an obligation? That's the hard part. So we have to make sure that they know that what we're doing is worthy of their time. It's worthy to go out and be able to assist in their communities. Just so happened about a month ago, Ohio had a big snow event. We had 18 inches of snow in 24 hours. And so we were out in the area. I was not home. I was with other ASNs. And once they lifted the level 3, where you couldn't go out unless you were emergency personnel, and it was level 2, we were in and about the city. And we stopped to help people pull out, get unstuck, shovel out. And the place where we were going, was full of snow, and we shoveled the sidewalks in the driveway and shoveled the next door neighbor's porch steps because she was elderly, and swept everything off. That's what militias do. Militias help when people need help. They go in and they might organize. Maybe you've got somebody who's elderly who can't cut their grass. Maybe they need a new porch built. Maybe there's repairs to their home. That's what militia can do in the meantime, right? Those are all worthy aspects of militia. We're there to help people in their time of need with whatever that is. You know, if you drive by a neighbor's house and their grass is a foot tall, maybe there's an illness. Maybe their mower is broken. They don't know what else to do. Maybe they can't afford to fix it. What can your militia do for those people? How can you help? You don't have to tell them you're militia. You can just go and say, hey, we noticed. Would you like your grass cut? Could we help you with that? Hey, do you need your car unstuck? We're out and about. Can we help you? Do you need a push? Right? And so we can take militia. Yes, it is our defense of our borders if we're being assaulted. It is time of help in the need of disasters, tornadoes. They say next week through the Midwest, we may experience some tornado events. If in your area you've got a tornado event, it's a perfect opportunity for your ASNs in that area to get together and go help. Go be the militia. Maybe it's cleaning up debris. Maybe it's securing a home. Maybe it's just comforting someone. Okay. So, you know, in our militia, we have our militia structures. Your militia should have a structure. You should know how your militias are structured. You can always email the Ohio Assemblies at theohioassembly00@proton.me. We have militia documents we're happy to share. And our militia is organized. Remember, we have a state militia. We have units of that state militia on our counties, but they don't act all by themselves. Okay. They act through and of the state militia. Now, if a sheriff needs to put a posse together, he might use militia members, but that's not really the militia unit being activated. All right. So kind of understanding the militia and how it works. You know, again, Ohio took a different approach than many states. We looked at it and said, how do we organize it first? What is it going to look like? And then we built it. Okay. Some people will say back in the old days that they had a kind of a vision of a house in their head and they would just start building. Sometimes that worked out well and sometimes it didn't, right? Sometimes they had problems. Sometimes the walls weren't square. Sometimes the roofs didn't fit well. And so what we have to do is we have to realize that in everything that we do to build our assemblies, that most of the time to be successful, we've got to have a plan. Okay. And we've got to be organized so that we can move it into the place. Otherwise, it's chaotic. And that's when disagreements and all of those things that plague our assemblies happen, when we don't have a plan. It's your state plan. Okay? Ohio built their plans. Lisa Schaefer didn't build them. The Ohio Assembly built them. Okay? All right. Canceling 2-cent stamps. What color ink pens for which type of mailing, letter versus court documents, and which 45 degrees upper left to lower or vice versa. Okay. So I don't have a document here that I can show you, but when you cancel a 2-cent stamp, there's a couple different. So there's the dark 2-cent stamps, and then there's the light 2-cent stamps. Okay. And either gold or silver are the ones that you want to cancel those 2-cent stamps with. Silver works better on the dark ones, and the gold works better on the light ones. So on the back, whenever you're sending a document in, the de facto likes to play games. So on the back of a document, for example, let me hold a document up. On the back of a document, you would take, and I think my camera's backwards, so you would take it and put it in the lower right quadrant, okay, somewhere right about here, and you would turn that stamp so that it's pointing that direction, okay, and then you just simply sign through it. We have to remember intent is everything, right? And so if it's not a perfect 45-degree angle and you've signed through it, it's okay, right? What's important about putting the 2-cent stamp on the lower right quadrant of the document, first of all, we always sign on the right side of a document because we believe we're on the right. It's a tradition that comes from being on the right-hand side of God. And putting that 2-cent stamp and canceling through says that this is a real document signed by you as postmaster, and that there is something on the back side of that document so that when they scan it through a scanner, they don't scan the blank side. And that they can't ignore the front side. And that's really what it's there for. Okay? All right. Hi, Lisa. Do you know how many district courts have closed in Ohio since Anna's proclamation? Well, I can't say, I can't attest to the fact that any of them have closed. But I do know that they've been substantially slowed down, and that there are some processes that people are having more success with in terms of the courts recognizing them, recognizing their status within that. That's progress, right? It's going to take a while. Anybody that expects the magic to just happen at the wave of the paper you're kidding yourself, really. Sorry, we all think that it should be that easy, and it should, lawfully and legally, but it isn't. We're dealing with criminals. But since they've been stripped of the protections, and if they operate outside of their office, then they can be personally liable. And there's nothing a lawyer hates more to hear, or a judge who is a lawyer, than they have personal liability in the whole thing, right? Going to make them think twice. So, we have to remember that they're operating on commercial jurisdictions. the administrative courts are just rogue. Our regular county and municipal courts, they're rogue. They're rogue courts. They're administrative. They have nothing to do with the Northwest Ordinance. And anybody that goes into court can bring up that administrative law that it's rogue. They can bring up the fact that they have no delegation of authority. You might get held in contempt of court. Rack the charges up, right? But you can also ask them that due to certain cases like Escobedo versus State, or the 10th Amendment, or the 9th Amendment, that they have an obligation to Americans. So you as an American, how are they going to serve that? Where's their delegated authority? Because you didn't delegate them the authority. The state of Ohio certainly doesn't have the power to delegate them that authority. The federal government doesn't have the ability to delegate that authority. And unless Congress signs something, reads it and signs it, reads it 3 times and signs it, they didn't give that delegated authority. Okay? So sometimes you have to go through and you have to think about this process. And what's the commercial side? Well, if it's for a traffic infraction, were you driving in commerce? Were you driving Uber or Lyft at the time? Did you have passengers or did you have companions in the car? Were you driving in commerce, meaning you're either delivering passengers or you're delivering packages? Otherwise, you're traveling in your private capacity, in your private conveyance. And even though you have a driver's license, I would make the statement that, yes, I've complied with all the commercial requirements of Ohio. However, I was not traveling commercially. And therefore, those commercial codes do not apply to me. Okay? Now, don't argue it on the side of the road. Those police officers are oblivious to what that means. And they're probably going to haul you in. And then you got to fight in court. The easiest way with a traffic ticket is just be quiet, right? Take the ticket. And it's a contract. It is the opportunity to contract. And you can rescind that contract within 3 days, 3 business days of getting the ticket. Everyone that we've rescinded on Ohio went away. Okay? It's a very simple process. If you want to see an example, again, you can email me at the Ohio Assembly 00@proton.me. So Anna has just joined us, so I'm going to add Anna to the stage. Hi, Anna.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
I am fresh from the fight and ready to go back for more.
Oh, I wish you could send me some of that. I woke up this morning with an elephant on my chest.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. It's not been fun.
Nettles tea.
I've been using Mullen. I have my Mullen. So
That's always good.
I've been doing my Mullen. And I have my nicotine patch, and I had a couple doses of chlorine dioxide solution. So hopefully I'll have it kicked by tomorrow. So
if not, there's always Nettles tea.
Okay.
N-E-T-T,
and I have some of that.
That is my grandmother's go-to was always nettle tea. And I observed as a young girl that nettles grow in graveyards. Grandma, why should we? That doesn't sound like a good thing.
Here you go. All right.
To nettles tea. And she just laughed at me and said, no, they're to keep you out of the graveyard. See, they're nettles.
All right. Well, I decided since I wasn't feeling all that well this morning that I'd just take some questions and answers today. So we've had some good questions. So I'm going to continue on with questions and answers. So when the counties are stood up, How does that affect incorporated cities who exist in more than one county? That's Ralph Ashworth on Georgia. So they're saying that the city splits a county.
Well, what ideally we're going for is to get rid of all the municipalities that are currently, pockmarking America. The municipal government isn't supposed to be in the states of the union, and they know that. That's it. They were acting extraterritorially, and basically they were violating their labor contract to do that. So ideally, all those incorporated cities will go away because it's not in their contract that they should exist. And we are enforcing the constitutions on them.
How will
So
that
that's the rule.
how will that affect then? For example, Anna, I live in an unincorporated township. One
It
of the
wouldn't
few.
affect you.
Mhm.
As long as it's unincorporated, it would not affect you at all. But any foreign corporations from the District of Columbia that have come out into the states of the Union and established city-states have to go. They just have to, they have to be reorganized, placed under new management.
In an unincorporated government.
Right.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. In our American common law courts, who vets the jurors and how?
Well, it's a pretty simple system. You draw the jury pool, and then both sides get their opportunity to ask the potential jurors questions, such as, do you know the plaintiff or the defendant personally? Do you have a relationship with either the defendant or the plaintiff in the case, the complainant? The injured party is the correct thing for us. It's the injured party. So both sides get to ask the jurors questions to ascertain whether they are capable of being a disinterested third party. And so you go through this jury selection process. So basically, it's not a vetting, it's not like the vetting committee vets jurors. It's the prosecutor and the injured party both get a chance to kind of interview the jurors and make sure that they don't have a connection or conflict of interest.
So how does that apply then in grand jury when you're picking grand jurors?
Grand jurors are told that they need to recuse themselves if they know the person that's being investigated, and they just step out for that particular investigation.
Okay.
Grand jurors are supposed to stay quiet about their activities anyway. And so if you know somebody and they are being investigated, you're not supposed to tell them that they're being investigated. But on the other hand, if you know that person, you're supposed to recuse yourself and step aside for the purposes of that investigation.
Okay. And is it the same then also in criminal courts where the accused and the claimant? Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah, well, in criminal cases and civil cases, if you know somebody, you're pretty much under honor to raise your hand and say so, even if you don't get asked that question directly, because anything that is a conflict of interest or a possible prejudice can lead to a mistrial if it's discovered later on down the line. And that just wastes a whole lot of time and money for everybody.
Sure. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. All right. Regarding assembly finances, does it make sense to set up an assembly account via GFG once it is available?
Well, you have to understand the situation that we've been in. And that is that we had to completely re-gear everything toward being able to meet retail accounts so that people would have money during a government shutdown or through any kind of currency instability or lack of currency or any of the other things that could happen. So we went from being a bank for banks to being a retail bank that could reach 8 billion people and save lives. And now we're going back to pick up the rest of the infrastructure, so to speak. Because we originally intended just to be a bank between banks so that the banks could talk to each other and distribute money out to national banks at the state level. See, states are nations. So it's a little bit of a language snafu in that we have First National Bank of, right? But that's because states are nations in this country.
Mhm.
And so we were looking at developing the national banks at the state level. And then the state level banks would be the ones that you would go to have an assembly account. And you'd have what's known as a sovereign treasury account with your own state national bank that would be under your charter. So that's how that would work. You'd have the state national bank established. Then within that system, you'd have a sovereign account in your own chartered state bank. And we haven't gotten to that level of sophistication yet, but that's the next thing on the docket after everybody has their individual account up and running and you're able to do your daily transactions. We'll set up the state national banks. Then your accounts will transfer over to your own state national bank. If you're in Ohio, it would go to your Ohio State National Bank.
Mhm.
And then you'd be doing business directly with your own bank in your own state. And the assembly would have a sovereign account within its own bank. And it would also have its own sovereign wealth fund, its own, I guess you could say, its own savings account. Okay. You'd have a savings account, a sovereign investment account, and a sovereign business account. So you'd actually have 3 accounts. They'd all be sovereign accounts because the state assembly is a sovereign entity.
Mhm.
And you'd be able to wheel and deal with the state money, which is, of course, the money that you have for infrastructure and education and all the other things that the state has to do.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Would you go into some detail on court of record?
Well, a court of record is really very simple. Once you have elected a justice or 2, hopefully 3, it's always good to have a true empanelment. If you have 3 justices, a court of record is simply a decision that the court makes based on the public record. So, for example, you have reconveyed your house from the clutches of the local incorporated county. You then bring forward your reconveyance document. You bring forward their title document. You bring forward proof that you've paid off any obligation that you had to the county of organization before you transferred the title. And then the justices, they just look at it and they go, okay, well, it was under a title here and it was sold to a new owner who paid for it there. Here's the bill of sale receipt, whatever paperwork you have showing that you actually bought the property. And then you have the reconveyance document recorded, and with the land title office or wherever you've done your reconveyance document. And the justices, they look at that and they go, okay, well, they went from this system, paid for the property, into this system. It's yours. So they render a decision based on the public records that you bring forward, and well, the private record, the bill of sale that you bring forward. But anyway, it's all just based on the paperwork that you can present.
Right.
And that's what the court of record is. You are judging the record.
It's about the written record. It's
right,
about
the
what
written record. Exactly. Right. And so, say that you're accused of a crime back in Arkansas in 1986, and you serve 3 months in jail on a misdemeanor, and you have your court paperwork. It was this such and such a case and such time and place, and then here's the sentence, here's the 3 months served, and here's the discharge paperwork. Okay, so as long as you have your discharge paperwork, the court can look at the record and say, okay, you served your time. They don't have any right to have a warrant on this. It's outdated and blah, blah, and they can just go quash that. You see, it's just whatever written paperwork can be brought to bear to decide the issue. You decide the issue in a court of record based on the public record or private records, mostly public records, but things like bills of sale and that sort of thing that would normally arise in the course of private business can also be validated and be records in a court case.
All right.
So,
okay, so we had a question earlier about who would go and contact or talk to the Secretary of State of your state. And so this is a follow-up question. Is the chairman or chairwoman from the International Business Assembly or the General Assembly, or what assembly or committee would that chairperson come from?
You would want your General Assembly chair to take it up with the U.S. Secretary of State, depending on what the issue is. I mean, sometimes there's something that you need to take up with the secretary, because if it's personal business, you want to handle it yourself. You want your name to come before them and on their desk, and you want to say, okay, this is me and this is what I need from your office. Okay. If it's something that's about the assembly, that the assembly normally would address, then it's the responsibility of the General Assembly chairperson to speak for the assembly. That's their job, is to speak for the assembly and to bring that issue forward to the Secretary of State. Now, for example, let's say that you live in one of the counties bordering the Mexican border, and it's a largely Hispanic county, and you have a lot of Hispanic people in your county who have relationships with folks on the other side of the border. And while you understand the need to control the border, you would like to have a relationship with ICE that was less militant and more practical, and say that you wanted to engage the U.S. Secretary of State to act as an intermediary for that process. It's entirely appropriate for your assembly, your state assembly, to address the issue with the U.S. Secretary of State and say, well, we're having problems with the enforcement sector not talking to us, not not respecting private property rights, not communicating with the local people so that they know the difference between the local people who have a right to be there and those who are there illegally. Whatever the issue is, then it becomes an assembly issue for the state assembly as well as your county. But anyway, it's your assembly chairperson that would be writing that letter and would be serving as the contact point.
General Assembly.
Right, General Assembly.
Okay. All right. I'm not sure I understand this question. How we fill in on the document that we submit to GFG. Now that's from Dorothea. She's on South Africa. So I'm not sure what that means, Dorothea.
Yeah, I'm not sure which document you're talking about. If you're talking about the declaration or the witness statement or something else.
Right.
It will ask for your state, but you can always indicate that you're from, say, South Africa. And if you just fill in your equivalent, if it's called a province, just fill that the equivalent unit that you have in. I need to take a look at what the GFG's got now for the documents. We have our own documents for the states, right?
Right.
But we tried to create a universal document that would allow people that would, cantons in Switzerland are the equivalent of states in America, in terms of the organizational chart. Mm-hmm. So we were trying to set up something that would allow people from different parts of the world that have different names for states, or even don't have states, that just have a single nation, to be able to fill out the paperwork. So I need to look at what GFG's got now, Dorothea. And we'd have to kind of sit down and look at the particular document that you're asking about.
Yeah, if Dorothea, you could put that in the little further down in the chat, maybe we can come back and visit that if we have time. Okay. All right. This might be a tough question. When there's an established assembly and then a different coordinator decides to hold a meeting and split the assembly on the same day at the same time, which meeting do you go to?
That's a crazy making question. That shouldn't happen, first and foremost. There is only one assembly at any given time. If they lose their coordinator and then there's a new coordinator who establishes a new general assembly meeting time because they can't make the old assembly meeting time or something, well, then you switch to the new meeting time. But otherwise, that would never normally occur.
Okay. Okay, I have a question for you just on this comment. Jim Fulton is the National Militia Commander. I didn't know we had a national militia.
We don't.
Thank you. All right. Somebody implied to me that the militia can be used to enforce our laws against the de facto. Is that true?
It is in theory, but we would not normally be using our militia for any such activity. Normally, what happens if we have a problem with the de facto and wish to enforce our laws, we go to the de facto and we say, look, this is our public law. Will you enforce it or not? If the answer is no, that's not within our bailiwick, then we enforce it. But we don't use militia to enforce it. We use our sheriffs to enforce it. Militia.
If it's international, it would also get enforced by our continental marshals when they're commissioned. Is that correct?
Yeah, we've got multiple layers and multiple services that actually endeavor to cover all the jurisdictions. So the continental marshals are the ones that take care of international law on the land. So they do things like counterfeiting and human trafficking and smuggling of all kinds, and those kinds of crimes. And then the state militia, which is the land jurisdiction version of the National Guard, is there for disasters and invasions and things of that nature when and if there's a need. So all the things that you are used to seeing the National Guard show up for, say that there's a flood and the National Guard is called out to help the villages that are being flooded. Okay, that the militia plays the same role for the land jurisdiction that the National Guard plays for the sea jurisdiction at the present time. Hopefully the National Guard and the militia will be combined as the militia.
Right.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
In the instance where you have a disaster and the militia is there to help protect the property and the people. If there are looters, they have the ability to hold and arrest them, right? And interface with the local law enforcement or your land sheriff or the National Guard to take care of those particular issues of law.
Right. So our law enforcement is more, our law is more centered on our court system and our officers of the court and our sheriffs.
Correct. Okay. What if you get a ticket in another state?
Same drill.
Okay. It's just an offer to contract. That's it. It is an offer to contract. You have the ability and the right to contract or not. As long as you rescind that contract within 72 hours. So stop at the next post office, pick up a priority mail envelope. There's certain language that you write on the ticket itself at a 45-degree angle, and you send that ticket back into them. I doubt you will ever hear another word from them again.
Let's explain what's going on with that, Lisa.
Okay.
The police stop you. They give you a ticket for a broken taillight, whatever. You accept the ticket and you sign the ticket, right? They give it to you. They present it. You sign it. Your signature is payment, and that ticket is a payment ticket. So when the officer turns in his booklet at the end of the day with all his copies of all the tickets, which are always the originals, they always give you a copy of the ticket, right? So he takes those original signed tickets and gives them to a clerk, and the clerk goes, and they send them out immediately. They enter them in and they collect the money. They've already collected the money for that traffic stop. Now you don't know any better, so you take this copy home and you pay it again, allowing them to double dip. Okay, they're trying to get you to pay it twice. Once that they collect from the system, from your public trust, and one that they collect from you extra. Okay. So they've already sent in and gotten paid for this, and they can't come back and officially go back a second time and collect a second time from you. So when you send the ticket, your copy of the ticket back and say, oh, there's been a mistake, I don't have the original ticket payoff, to pay the bill, you can't pay off of a copy, you have to have the original, then they're unable to produce the original because they've already submitted the original for payment. And this
Right.
keeps them, this process here keeps them from double dipping.
So what that verbiage says, as I read down, it says return service with the priority mail number on it, refused for cause, not traveling in commerce, no UCC trust contract. Thank you for your offer to contract, but I do not consent to contract with you. No contract. And then we've added New York versus Bruin, no licensing for a right needed, all unalienable rights reserved, and then your by signature. And that's what it says.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had great success with that.
Yeah, what could you send me a copy of that? Because I get questions all the time, and I'd like to have an example like this to just be able to,
And
return to people.
it's pretty handy. It's very
It's,
handy to have.
it's very handy, and people get ripped off right and left with these things like traffic tickets. That and they're just blatantly double dipping. They're charging your trust fund and you, and they shouldn't be doing it.
Right. Okay. Hope that helps. All right. I'm going to remove that. Anna, is the common law training manual referred to last week the one by Kevin Annett and David Robinson?
There are several different versions out, but it's Kevin Annett's ITSSC, well, International Tribunal of Crimes of Church and State, ITCCS, jurors instruction book. It's only about 100 pages long, and it's called something like The Reign of Natural Law. But it's listed at TASA. There's a whole section there about the different kinds of book resources that we have available. And I do believe at one time it was even offered in the TASA store. So this is the kind of the juror's cheat sheet. It's a quick and dirty explanation of the common law, the authority of the common law, how common law works, the part of the juror, the special abilities and powers of the juror, and our traditions of law that allow the jury to act with an authority that surpasses any kind of statutory law. So it's just a really good, clean, brief handbook for jurors. And if you go to the TASA website, you'll see that they have a kind of a resources section, and all of these different common law books are listed there.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. What is the training for coordinators, and how long are current coordinators taking this program?
Well, you're more up to speed on all that than I am, Lisa, but it's about a 6 to 7 week course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I of course, Anna has allowed me to do this training with the coordinators. And I figure it's going to take about 6 weeks to do the full course. In that time, we'll be able to go over all the structural development of the assemblies, the do's and the don'ts. There seems to be a lot of don'ts, and there needs to be a lot more do's, and we'll try to get into that. And right now in that course, of course, I've got the new coordinator from South Carolina has joined us, our new coordinator in Indiana, new coordinators in North Carolina, as well as some of the old coordinators on North Carolina have been invited. I have quite a few coordinators that are from the area 0. And, um, and so, we're just kind of going over structurally all of the things that are our assembly. Of course, Anna, I've got that they were given a reading list the first week of articles on coordinators that you've written. And we will process through all of that and discuss the issues and the things that are important to help our assemblies assemble. So I, my one best piece of advice to the coordinators was to let their assemblies, I described it this week as I was an art teacher, right? The process of art is messy. It's highly creative. It's sometimes very noisy. It can be a little chaotic. All right. Doesn't that describe our assemblies really well? And and I had a principal at one time who observed in my classroom for her annual observation, who said on my evaluation, it was controlled chaos, but it was highly creative and very productive. And that's the way our assemblies should be. It is in some ways that process of discussion, discovery, production, all of those things that go with it. They look like that noisy little art room that our kids are in during their weeks at school. And we have to allow those processes. We can't box them in this way and be rigid about it. We've got to allow people to expand and develop and grow in the process, right, of putting our assemblies together.
Right.
And so, I've told the coordinators, as long as it's following our assembly process and our assembly principles, right, and things are staying on track, get out of the way. Get out of the way. Coordinators are there to coordinate between the Federation and their state assemblies. They're there to act as guide and information and to be a resource for their people. But they're not there to put up the stop signs, right? They're not there to stop the progress of an assembly.
Right. Right. We're facilitators. We're not street gendarmes.
Exactly.
And I just want to say, Lisa's been highly effective and successful as a coordinator for Ohio and knows the job. And I want everybody to be appropriately grateful that we now have people like Lisa who have successfully navigated that trail ahead of us and who can help and give insight and answer questions and describe processes and be there as that kind of hands-on help. When we started this, it was just the Federation and volunteers, and everybody was scrabbling along trying to find their feet and get everything organized, first of all, in their own minds, and then to go out and facilitate taking a group action. Well, now we actually have coordinator training that's organized, and it's not just Terry or just me or, you have additional support from people on the states who have actually gone forward and done it. Okay. So you've got some really wonderful mentors and resources now that have been developed over the course of the last 5 years that were not there when we started out. And thank God for it, huh? Thank Source. Thank the ever expanding morphogenetic information field that we now have those sorts of resources available to our would-be coordinators who are just volunteering for the first time and who are stepping up and either replacing coordinators who, for one reason or another, had to step away, or who are expanding the ranks of the coordinator force, because in many states, unless you're a tiny, tiny state like Rhode Island, you're going to need more of the coordinators than just one usually. And so a good part of what we're doing now is expanding the coordinator force so that, say, in a state like California, they need maybe 15 coordinators, just simply because the state is so large and the work is so overwhelming and the population being represented is so varied.
Right. Thank you, Anna. Okay. If the de facto state isn't providing Z plates, can we give them notice that after 90 days, our state is going to provide Z plates for our nationals?
Well, we can. Here's the problem. We're in a process now where both ends of the de facto government is in it. They're going around and around like that. They're just, the municipal government isn't even supposed to be here. The state government that remains is the British territorial state of state. And they're the ones that actually do owe the Z plates. So it may be easier to talk to them about the Z plates. But the Z plates were something that was set up by the Federal Reserve Board of Governors as a remedy to the fact that otherwise they were taking possession of private property. And now the Federal Reserve is gone.
And I might add, they were a third-party non-governmental agency, so they really had no business in it to begin with.
No, it was only because they were picking up automobiles to use as collateral for government debt. And the only automobiles or trucks that they could legitimately register as government property and use as collateral for government debt, of course, were vehicles belonging to the government. And the Federal Reserve Board, they called it a board of governors, realized that, oh, well, what are we going to do if we require registration of all vehicles? See, they had to come up with different words even. They couldn't, right, they had to use terms of art. If we're going to register all vehicles, meaning all cars and trucks that are engaged in commercial business and making money off of the public road access. If we're going to do that, then we have to make a distinction between commercial vehicles and non-commercial vehicles, or non-commercial cars and trucks, rather. And they called them automobiles. Okay, so they made a distinction between commercial vehicles and automobiles of any kind. A truck is an automobile in their language. Okay. So
or a conveyance, because
conveyance.
Yeah, that's more generic to the whole thing.
Yeah. So anyway, the Board of Governors said, oh, well, we have to have a way of letting people register without registering. There has to be a designation that shows that these are privately owned cars.
Sorry.
Uh-oh.
6 minutes till.
Okay. I'm going to have to buzz on off out of here today. But anyway, guys, that was the deal with the Z plates. And now that the Federal Reserve is gone, it's kind of iffy what's going on. We
Mr.
need.
Bergen's already warmed up.
Thank you. We need to basically come to the existing state of state government and say, look, we need to hammer this out. We need an agreement on how we're going to identify privately owned cars that are not being used in commerce.
Right. All right, Anna, I'm gonna
6
see
minutes.
you, and Shannon will be back in here stomping his feet. So, all right. Yep. Thank you for joining us for a little while. We appreciate it very much. I'm going to answer that question a little bit more because Ohio's getting ready to do that exactly that
Okay,
state.
great.
We'll see how it
All right.
goes.
Good on you. Go get them.
All right.
Take
Thanks
care out, guys.
for joining us. All right. So yeah, so Ohio has we are working on, and one of the things that we are working on currently within our International Business Assembly is we are working on establishing our state authority. And that's really important. State authority, if you haven't thought about it, they don't want to recognize us. But under the 10th Amendment, they have to recognize us, but only if we enforce that recognition. And so what we've done is we went back to our state constitution and found out how to do that. And in what way, sorry, we need to write a notice or a demand, basically. And that's going to go to the governor, to the state legislatures, both the House and Senate. It's going to go to the provost marshal, as well as to the Supreme Court. And it's going to say, look, this is our state authority. And we're here. We're going to be here to help, but we're also going to be here to tell you exactly what we want and what we don't want. And oh, by the way, we want our property. As I said earlier, Ohio is getting ready to, the Ohioans on Ohio, who are municipal citizens, are getting ready to work on property taxes. Well, that leaves the door for the state assembly to jump in, because the state assembly is actually the only one that can stop the property taxes. Not the governor, not the House of Representatives, not the Senate. But that's going to influence and push our state assembly into that spotlight to claim the authority on our state. And that's our recent research. So we'll keep you posted on how that goes. But with that also is going to come the enforcement of our AAMVA notice, inclusion in their jurisdictional definitions. That will also be recognition for our credential cards, and it'll be recognition for our own placards issued by our own state assembly that claims our own state authority. Okay. So it's important that you understand the difference between those and where we're heading as assemblies. It takes time for us. We have to publicly elect our assemblies. We have to stand our assemblies and be fully standing with our public elected officials. And we have to be operating in a manner that is consistent and recognizable on our states. That means that we're doing the appropriate things. We're not just paper terrorists anymore. We're claiming that state authority and making it work for us. So that's what Ohio's got going on as we move forward. And, you know, again, I believe that our commissioning of our continental marshals will be extremely important in the fact of pushing that recognition and having the teeth to be able to push that in their jurisdiction as well. Okay. So current state coordinators, not wannabes, correct? And I am right. And I, yes, this is identified by their assemblies who are going to put forward state coordinators. It's not for county coordinators. It is state coordinators. Okay. Can county coordinators join the program? Well, I think I just answered that. If your state's not fully standing, you know, you need to be working on your state and get it standing. Your protection of your counties, your protection of your state is dependent right now on your state standing and your state recognition. Okay. All right. I do not have this info. How do we get this info for training? Well, Barbara, you can email me. I believe you have my email address. You can email me and I can add you to the training. I have recordings from last week. We just started last week. So I can send you a recording along with your request to join the training. Okay. Does the coordinator know that we, the people, are in charge and not them? Well, that's one of the things they're learning in their coordinator training is where their boundaries are, what their job is, how their assemblies are supposed to assemble, and where the authority of the assembly actually lies. And so that is something that within that training, they're going to get over the next 6 weeks, at least. And hopefully it doesn't take more than 6 weeks. Okay. It's a lot to learn. All right. All right. If your state has 200 counties, you'll need over 200 coordinators. No, you don't. So what Anna means is so coordinators need to work together. They need to mesh together. They kind of form almost like a support group among themselves. They're there to bounce questions and issues among each other. They're there to do research in different areas if the assembly needs it in different areas. But in a diverse state where there's a vast geographical divide, you may need enough coordinators to cover in the different geographical regions, just to have somebody who's contact, so that you're not just got one person who has to answer a phone or answer emails. And it could be something where, you kind of divide up who answers what in what area, okay, with your coordinators. And that's going to be one of the things I suggest to states with multiple coordinators is that, your contact, and when you're a coordinator, you are a public person. Okay, let me get that very straight. People have to have the ability to contact you and get an answer from you by phone, by email. And we need to use that prudently. Okay, you got somebody that's constantly blowing your phone up and sucking up your time. I always remind everybody that on Ohio, there's one of me and there's 11.7 million of you. Be respectful, right? In the same way that those coordinators need to kind of geographically divide up the state and then be able to take calls or questions. And if they don't know the answer, it's okay to say, I don't know. Let me go back to the coordinator group and see if somebody can help me answer this question, right? It's okay to not know what you don't know, but it's better to go ask for the information. Okay. Can you say the email address again so I'm sure I have the right one? Well, you can always email the Ohio Assembly 00 at proton.me. That's our public email address. The Ohio Assembly 00 at proton.me. Okay. All right. And then I have one little question in there, recognition. So what does recognition mean? That means that you are officially recognized as a state authority. You claim your authority under the 10th Amendment. And you're able to then enforce by your notices, your directives, those things to the state that you're going to be issuing as an assembly. Okay. It's vitally important. All right. Vitally important. And that's the step that everybody who hasn't gotten their state assembly up to is missing when it comes to sending their notices in, and they either get sent back, because Ohio, before we had our publicly elected government, The notices, many of them got sent back. Once we publicly elected and published that in the newspapers, we don't get notices sent back. They land. Okay. And that's just one way of putting it in terms of recognition. Now, you can call it whatever you want, right? But in order for the state to recognize you as an authority, you're going to have to enforce that in their jurisdiction. So it's not permission. We don't need their permission. But what we do need is them to see who we are, that we have a superior jurisdiction, that they acknowledge that superior jurisdiction. And when we talk, they listen. Okay? That's recognition. Okay? Okay. I hope that was really good for everybody. I hope that was good information. Thank you for all the questions. I really loved today. I feel a little bit better after being able to get through everything. So, we will see you next week. Hopefully, things will be a little bit easier for me next week, and we'll have a topic. If you have a topic that you would like to have addressed or researched, please feel free to email me at the Ohio Assembly 00, and we'll see if we can put together some training and things as we go. Okay. All right, everyone. Have an excellent week. Make it count. Work on your assemblies, and let's get assembling. All right. Bye for now.